My name is Olivia Began, and last Thanksgiving, as my family gathered around the table laden with turkey and all the trimmings, my mother's words cut through the festive atmosphere like a knife. Stop dreaming, you're no Einstein. The room fell silent, my father staring at his plate, siblings exchanging uncomfortable glances. What my mother didn't know as she mockingly dismissed my research career was that in exactly 47 minutes, the Nobel Prize Committee would announce my name during their live-streamed ceremony. The years of dismissal, of being told I was reaching too high, were about to end in the most vindicating way possible. If you've ever had your dreams belittled by the very people who should support you most, let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this journey of underestimation and ultimate triumph, hit that subscribe button and join me as I share how intellectual ambition can survive even in the soil of familial doubt. I grew up in a modest suburban home where academic achievement was acknowledged, but not celebrated, unless it belonged to my brother James. While his math competitions and science fair trophies warranted special dinners and proud phone calls to relatives, my equally impressive accomplishments were met with practical concerns. That's nice, Olivia, but what kind of job will philosophy of science actually get you? Was my mother's standard response. My father, though quieter in his dismissal, never contradicted her. The pattern was established early. James was the real genius of the family, while I was the dreamer with impractical interests. I remember the evening my high school research paper won the National Young Scientists Award. I rushed home, certificate in hand, heart pounding with pride. James had won the same award 3 years earlier, and the family had celebrated with champagne, even letting him have a sip, though he was underage, and a weekend trip to the Science Museum in the city. When I burst through the door and announced my news, Mom was preparing dinner, Dad was watching TV. That's nice, honey. Can you set the table? We're eating in 20 minutes, Mom said, barely looking up from the chicken she was seasoning. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone with Aunt Sarah. Yes, Olivia won some science thing. I think the judges must have been easier this year than when James won. The Thanksgiving mockery wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of a lifetime of dismissal. I had just returned from Cambridge, where I'd been conducting quantum entanglement research for the past 3 years. My work had been gaining significant attention in the scientific community, though my family remained oblivious to my rising reputation. So, Olivia, still playing with your little theories? My mother asked as she passed the mashed potatoes, her tone dripping with condescension. When are you going to get a real job like your brother? James just made senior research director at Pharmatech, you know. James at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mom, Olivia's work is actually quite important in the field. Oh, please, she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. All these years of education, and what do you have to show for it? No house, no family, not even a decent salary. Stop dreaming, you're no Einstein. The table fell silent. My father studied his plate with sudden interest, while my younger sister Amy nervously rearranged her food. The familiar pain of being diminished lodged in my throat, but this time, it was accompanied by something else, a quiet certainty. I checked my watch. 2:13 p.m. The Nobel Prize Committee would be making their announcement at 3:00 p.m., live streaming it globally. Only my research partner, Dr. Eliza Chen, knew I was on the short list. We'd been sworn to secrecy during the final deliberation period. 3 days ago, I'd received a cryptic call suggesting I might want to be available for today's announcement. Actually, Mom, I said calmly, setting down my fork, my research secured over $12 million in funding last year. That's why I could afford to buy that lake house I mentioned, the one you said was probably just a cabin. My mother blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Well, that's government money, not real money. Anyone can get grants for theoretical nonsense these days. I took a slow sip of water, measuring my next words. Did you ever actually read any of my published papers? Or visit my laboratory when I invited you to Cambridge? Why would I waste time reading about things that don't matter in the real world? She scoffed. Your brother's research saves lives. What does your quantum whatever do except give you an excuse to avoid growing up? The familiar dismissal stung, but I was no longer the insecure child desperate for approval. Years of standing my ground in predominantly male academic circles had forged a resilience my mother couldn't penetrate. My quantum whatever, as you call it, might just change how we understand reality itself, I replied, my voice steady, but I've learned not to expect you to understand that. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Eliza. It's happening. Are you watching? I excused myself from the table, ignoring my mother's irritated huff about basic manners and family time. In the living room, I opened my laptop and connected to the Nobel Prize livestream. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear of disappointment, but from the weight of what might come next. As I set up the stream, I heard my mother's voice carrying from the dining room. See that? Always distracted, always prioritizing her fantasies over family. I don't know where we went wrong with her. The irony was almost too perfect. In approximately 15 minutes, either my mother's lifelong dismissal of my capabilities would be vindicated, or her worldview would be shattered on international television. Part of me, the wounded child who had cried silently into her pillow after countless diminishments, hoped desperately for the latter. But the scientist in me, the woman who had dedicated her life to understanding the fundamental nature of reality, knew that regardless of the committee's decision, I had already won the more important battle. I had remained true to my passion despite every discouragement. I took a deep breath and turned up the volume as the live stream began. My journey to potential Nobel recognition began long before I ever set foot in a professional laboratory. It started in the quiet moments of my childhood, hiding in the attic with discarded science textbooks while my brother received private tutoring downstairs. It grew in the corners of public libraries where I spent weekends teaching myself advanced physics while my peers attended parties. My weapon was being constructed brick by brick, formula by formula, each one laid carefully despite, or perhaps because of, my mother's constant reminders that I was reaching beyond my grasp. By 16, I was auditing university physics courses, sitting silently in the back of lecture halls, where professors eventually noticed the high school girl who asked the most insightful questions. Dr. Raymond Torres, my first true mentor, saw what my family couldn't. Olivia, you have an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that some of my doctoral students lack, he told me after I'd solved a problem that had stumped his graduate seminar. When I received a full scholarship to MIT, my mother's response was predictable. Well, they must need more women in their statistics. She didn't attend my orientation, claiming a scheduling conflict with James's company picnic. My father sent a perfunctory congratulatory text, but suggested I consider something more practical than theoretical physics. At MIT, I flourished in the environment of intellectual curiosity and rigorous challenge. For the first time, my ideas weren't dismissed, but debated, refined, and built upon. I graduated summa cum laude, my thesis on quantum entanglement drawing attention from leading researchers in the field. Cambridge University offered me a research position immediately, and I left America behind, grateful for the distance from my family's undermining presence. The irony wasn't lost on me that, as the physical distance between us grew, so did my accomplishments. I published paper after paper, each one pushing the boundaries of our understanding of quantum entanglement. My theoretical framework for quantum communication across previously impossible distances attracted significant funding and collaboration offers from the most prestigious institutions worldwide. 3 years into my Cambridge position, Dr. Eliza Chen joined our research team. Brilliant, driven, and refreshingly straightforward, she became both colleague and friend. Together, we made the breakthrough that would change everything. A practical demonstration of controlled quantum teleportation that defied existing models of physics. You realize what we've done here, right? Eliza said the night our experiment succeeded, her normally composed demeanor cracking with excitement. This isn't just another paper, Olivia. This is history. The scientific community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Our paper in Nature was downloaded a record number of times in the first week. Conference invitations flooded in. Research institutions and tech companies offered partnerships with increasingly generous terms. Through it all, my family remained largely oblivious. During our monthly video calls, my mother would interrupt my attempts to explain my work with questions about when I planned to settle down, or comments about James's latest promotion. My father would nod vaguely, clearly not listening. Only Amy, my younger sister, showed genuine interest, though her understanding of quantum physics was limited. I stopped trying to make them understand. Instead, I channeled my energy into pushing our research further, working 18-hour days, sleeping on the cot in my lab when necessary. The validation I'd once sought from my family, I now found in the respect of my peers and the elegance of the universe's mysteries unfolding before me. The nomination for the Nobel Prize came as a shock, even to me. The committee typically favors discoveries that have withstood the test of time, often decades. Our breakthrough was barely 2 years old, but its implications were so profound, its potential applications so revolutionary, that the traditional timeline was accelerated. When the confidential letter arrived, Eliza and I sat in stunned silence in our lab, the formal language blurring before my eyes. Shortlisted for this year's Nobel Prize in Physics for groundbreaking work in quantum teleportation mechanisms. They'll never believe it, I whispered, thinking of my family. Eliza understood immediately who I meant. Then imagine their faces when they have no choice but to believe it, she replied, squeezing my hand. In the weeks leading up to the announcement, we were sworn to absolute secrecy. The final selection was still being deliberated. I carried on with my work, gave lectures, published another paper, all while carrying this enormous secret. When I decided to fly home for Thanksgiving, Eliza thought I was crazy. Why subject yourself to that environment right now? Stay here with us. We'll have a proper celebration, whatever the outcome. But something in me needed to be there, in that house, with those people who had so fundamentally misunderstood me. Not for vindication, or at least not only for that, but for closure. Whatever happened with the Nobel announcement, I needed to stand in my truth before the people who had tried, however unintentionally, to diminish it. As the live stream buffered on my laptop in my parents' living room, I felt strangely calm. The weapon I had forged wasn't just the scientific discovery that might win a Nobel Prize. It was the unshakable self-belief I had cultivated despite every discouragement. That was something no committee could bestow or take away. The Nobel Prize live stream opened with the familiar ceremony music, the camera panning across the elegant hall in Stockholm. I adjusted my laptop volume and positioned it on the coffee table, ensuring it was clearly visible from the dining room doorway. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady now. Olivia! My mother's voice carried from the dining room, sharp with irritation. We're having family time. Whatever you're watching can wait until after dinner. I didn't respond, my eyes fixed on the screen where the committee members were taking their seats. Professor Lars Henriksen, the committee chair, approached the podium, his expression solemn beneath his silver hair. Olivia Marie Began. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with the particular anger she reserved for when I defied her directly. She stopped short when she saw what was on my screen. The Nobel Prize? Really, Olivia? This is what couldn't wait? Watching celebrities get awards? I looked up at her, meeting her gaze directly. It's not celebrities, Mom. It's scientists. The Nobel Prize in Physics is being announced right now. She crossed her arms, unamused. And this couldn't wait because, from the dining room, I heard my father ask what was happening. James appeared behind my mother, curiosity evident on his face. Amy slipped past them both and sat beside me on the couch, her eyes widening as she recognized what we were watching. Because, I said simply, I need you all to see this. My mother rolled her eyes. See what? A bunch of old men getting awards for things nobody understands? We're having dessert, Olivia. Your aunt brought her famous pumpkin pie. On screen, Professor Henriksen began speaking, first in Swedish, then in English. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Nobel Prize in Physics this year for groundbreaking discoveries in the field of quantum mechanics and information transfer. Quantum mechanics, my mother repeated, her tone dripping with derision. Of course you'd be interested in that nonsense. James stepped fully into the room, his expression shifting as he watched me. My brother, for all his participation in the family dynamic, wasn't unintelligent. He had to have seen the articles, heard the rumors in scientific circles. His eyes narrowed slightly, moving from my face to the screen and back again. Mom, he said quietly, maybe we should watch this. Not you too. She sighed dramatically. Fine. 5 minutes, then pie. She remained standing, making it clear this was a temporary concession. Professor Henriksen continued, this year's laureates have demonstrated a mechanism for quantum teleportation that defies our previous understanding of physics. Their work has profound implications for secure communications, computing, and potentially the very nature of physical reality as we understand it. My father had wandered in now, looking confused but curious. My aunt and uncle followed, dessert plates still in hand. The Nobel Prize in Physics 2025 is awarded to Dr. Olivia Began and Dr. Eliza Chen of Cambridge University for their discovery of practical quantum teleportation mechanisms. The room froze. On screen, my face appeared alongside Eliza's. Professional photographs the committee had requested months ago under the guise of updating their research database. The camera cut to a live feed from Cambridge where Eliza sat surrounded by our research team, all of them erupting into cheers and applause. The silence in my parents' living room was absolute. Amy broke it first, her scream of delight piercing the tension as she threw her arms around me. Oh my God, you won! You actually won! James's expression transformed into genuine amazement and, I noted with a complex emotion I couldn't immediately identify, pride. Holy shit, Liv, he whispered, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. My father's mouth opened and closed several times, his eyes darting between me and the screen where Professor Henriksen was now reading a summary of our research. My aunt dropped her pie plate, the china shattering on the hardwood floor, forgotten, and my mother, she stood frozen, her face a study in conflicting emotions. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. Her entire worldview, her understanding of her children, of intelligence, of success, of me, was crumbling in real time. My phone began vibrating continuously as text messages, calls, and notifications flooded in. The committee had my number, of course, but they weren't the only ones calling now. University presidents, research directors, journalists, all reaching out simultaneously as the announcement spread across global media. You knew? My mother finally managed, her voice barely audible. You knew this was happening? I nodded, my eyes still on the screen where images of our laboratory and diagrams from our papers were now being shown. I was told to be available for today's announcement. Nothing was certain until now. Why didn't you say something? My father asked, moving further into the room. The question hung in the air, so heavy with irony I almost laughed. Why hadn't I told them? The same reason I'd stopped sharing anything meaningful with them years ago. Because they had proven, consistently and thoroughly, that they weren't interested in my success unless it fit their narrow definition of achievement. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. No one answered. No one needed to. On the screen, Professor Henriksen was explaining the practical applications of our discovery. This breakthrough has already transformed our understanding of quantum information transfer. The potential applications range from unhackable communication systems to revolutionary advances in computing power. Some theorists even suggest it may eventually lead to breakthroughs in transportation technology. My phone rang again, Eliza calling from Cambridge. I answered, putting it on speaker. We did it! Her voice came through, breathless with excitement. Olivia, are you watching? The whole lab is going crazy here. I'm watching, I confirmed, my voice steady despite the emotional storm inside me. I'm with my family. A brief pause. Eliza knew exactly what that meant. Ah, she said, her tone shifting subtly. Well, I hope they're properly shocked and awed, especially your mother. My mother flinched visibly. We'll talk later, I told Eliza. Celebrate with the team. I'll be back next week. As I hung up, my aunt stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Olivia, this is... I don't even have words. A Nobel Prize? Why didn't you ever tell us you were doing such important work? The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely bewildered. It cracked something open inside me. I tried, I said, my voice finally revealing the emotion I'd been controlling. For years I tried. I sent papers, invitations to lectures, links to articles about our research. I tried to explain it at every holiday, every family call. No one was interested. No one asked questions. No one even remembered what field I was in from one conversation to the next. The room fell silent again as my words sank in. The live stream continued, now showing archival footage of previous Nobel laureates in physics as the announcer provided context for our achievement's significance. My mother took a step toward me, her expression unreadable. The confrontation I had both dreaded and anticipated for years was about to begin. I need to sit down, my mother said, her voice thin as she sank into the armchair across from me. The color had drained from her face, leaving her looking older and somehow smaller than I'd ever seen her. On the screen, the ceremony continued. The presenter was now explaining in layman's terms how our quantum teleportation breakthrough worked, with animated graphics showing particles transferring information instantaneously across space. The camera occasionally cut to Eliza and our team in Cambridge, champagne already flowing as they celebrated. A Nobel Prize, my father repeated, as if saying it aloud might make it more comprehensible. My daughter won a Nobel Prize in physics. James approached slowly, his expression a complex mixture of awe and something that looked like regret. Liv, I knew your work was important, but this is historic. You're going to be in textbooks. Amy had pulled out her phone and was scrolling rapidly. Oh my God, Olivia, you're trending everywhere. CNN, BBC, all of them. Look. She thrust her phone toward me, showing the breaking news headlines. Quantum teleportation breakthrough wins Nobel Prize, and Began and Chen make physics history with Nobel win. My aunt and uncle were staring at me as if seeing me for the first time, which in some ways they were. Uncle Robert, who had patted my head condescendingly through decades of family gatherings, now stood awkwardly clutching his dessert fork, apparently forgotten in his hand. But it was my mother who held my attention. Her breathing had become shallow, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't understand," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "How could this happen? How could I not know?" "You knew," I said quietly, the words falling into the room like stones into still water. "You knew I was a research scientist in quantum physics. You knew I worked at Cambridge University. You knew I published papers and secured grants. You chose not to believe it mattered." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "How was I supposed to know the significance? You speak in jargon no normal person can understand. I sent you articles written for the general public. I tried to explain it in simple terms. Last Christmas, the BBC did a feature on our lab. I sent you the link 3 times. My voice remained calm, factual. "You didn't watch it," my father shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Olivia, your mother has always been proud of you." "No," I interrupted, surprising everyone including myself. I never interrupted my father. "She hasn't. She's tolerated my career as an eccentric hobby at best and a waste of potential at worst. Let's not rewrite history now." The room fell silent except for the continued commentary from the Nobel livestream. The presenter was now explaining how our discovery built upon Einstein's work on quantum entanglement, the very scientist my mother had mockingly compared me to less than an hour ago. My phone rang again. The display showed a number with a Swedish country code, the Nobel Committee calling for my official response. I silenced it, not breaking eye contact with my mother. "When I was 12, I said, my voice steady, "I won the state science fair with a project on particle behavior. James had won the same fair 3 years earlier, and you took him to Disney World as a celebration. Do you remember what you said when I showed you my blue ribbon?" My mother's face went blank, but James winced visibly. He remembered. "You said, 'That's nice, but it's not like you discovered anything real scientists don't already know.' I stayed up for weeks working on that project, reading college textbooks, writing to professors for guidance, and you dismissed it in one sentence." "You were just a child," my mother said defensively. "Children do science projects. It's not the same as—" "When I got my scholarship to MIT, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. You told relatives I got in because of gender quotas. When I graduated summa cum laude, you asked when I would get a real job instead of playing with theories. When Cambridge hired me, you called it hiding in academia." Each example hit visibly, my mother flinching slightly with each one. James and my father exchanged uncomfortable glances, neither contradicting me. "And less than an hour ago," I finished, "you sat at that table and told me to stop dreaming because I'm no Einstein. Those were your exact words." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. On the screen, the presenter was saying, "Many are already comparing the Began-Chen breakthrough to Einstein's revolutionary work in the early 20th century for its potential to fundamentally reshape our understanding of physics." Amy let out a small, involuntary laugh, quickly stifled. Uncle Robert actually dropped his fork, the metal clattering loudly on the hardwood floor. My mother's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, I thought they might be tears of remorse or even pride. But when she spoke, I realized they were tears of something far more complicated. "You did this deliberately," she said, her voice trembling. "You knew about this award and you came here to humiliate me in front of everyone." The accusation was so profoundly backwards that I could only stare at her for a long moment. "Mom," James interjected, his tone disbelieving, "Olivia just won the Nobel Prize. Can you not make this about you for once?" The room went completely still. James, the golden child, had never spoken to our mother that way, had never contradicted her narrative, had never taken my side against hers. "I came home for Thanksgiving," I said finally, my voice soft but unwavering, "because despite everything, you're my family. I wanted to share this moment with you. I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that this might finally be enough, that you might finally see me." I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the weight of decades of dismissal. The Nobel Prize in Physics is generally considered the highest achievement in my field. There is literally nothing more significant I could accomplish by the standards of my profession. If this isn't enough to make you proud, nothing ever will be. And I need to make peace with that. I turned to face the others. "I'm sorry about dessert. I have some calls to return. As I moved toward the door, my mother's voice stopped me. Olivia, wait. Her tone had changed, something cracking open in it. Please. I turned back. She had risen from her chair, tears streaming freely now. I don't know how to process this. All these years, I thought. You thought I was deluding myself, I finished for her. You thought I was playing at being a scientist, that my work wasn't real or valuable. You thought James was the truly brilliant one, and I was just… what? The family dreamer? The perpetual disappointment? She didn't deny it, couldn't deny it. I didn't understand, she whispered. You didn't try to understand, I corrected gently. There's a difference. My father stepped forward then, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. Your mother and I owe you an apology, Olivia. A profound one. We've been wrong about you, about your work, about everything, it seems. It was the most direct acknowledgement of failure I'd ever heard from him. My phone rang again. Cambridge University's president this time. The real world was waiting. My new reality calling. I reached for my laptop to close it, the Nobel livestream still playing in the background. Would you? My mother began hesitantly. Would you explain it to us? Your discovery? In terms we might understand? The request was so unexpected, so unprecedented that I paused with my hand on the laptop. For the first time in my memory, my mother was asking, genuinely asking, to understand my work. I'd like that, James added quickly. I've read some articles, but hearing it from you would be different. Amy nodded eagerly. Me too. I've been trying to follow your papers, but they're way over my head. I looked around at my family, really looked at them. My mother, tearful and confused, but asking to learn. My father, standing straighter as if preparing to hear something important. James, my brilliant brother who had just publicly defended me for the first time. Amy, who had always believed in me even when she didn't understand me. Even my aunt and uncle, hovering uncertainly but with genuine curiosity in their eyes. Something shifted inside me then. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but a door opening to its possibility. Okay, I said, closing the laptop and sitting back down. I'll explain it. But fair warning, it might change how you see the world. My mother wiped her tears and nodded, sitting across from me. I think, she said quietly, it already has. 6 months after that Thanksgiving revelation, I stood on the stage in Stockholm, accepting the physical Nobel Prize medal from the King of Sweden. The weight of the gold disc in my hand felt surreal, tangible recognition of work that had consumed a decade of my life. Beside me, Eliza beamed, her usual composure momentarily abandoned in the significance of the moment. As I stepped to the microphone for my acceptance speech, I spotted my family in the audience. All of them, dressed in formal attire, watching with expressions I once thought I'd never see directed at me. Unmitigated pride, absolute attention, genuine respect. The nature of quantum reality, I began, suggests that particles separated by vast distances remain connected, influencing each other instantaneously across space-time. In many ways, this mirrors human connections. My relationship with my family had undergone its own quantum shift since that Thanksgiving day. The change wasn't instantaneous or complete. Decades of established dynamics don't transform overnight, but the foundation had fundamentally altered. My mother had approached her re-education with the same intensity she'd once directed at minimizing my achievements. Within weeks of the announcement, she had read every article about our work she could find, from scientific journals to popular science magazines. She asked questions, genuine questions, and listened to the answers. I still don't fully understand the mechanics, she admitted during one of our now weekly phone calls. But I understand the importance, and I understand that I've been wrong about you your entire life. The admission hadn't come easily to her. My mother was not a woman accustomed to acknowledging her mistakes, particularly ones of such magnitude and duration, but the public nature of my achievement had made her usual denial impossible. The world recognized what she had refused to see, and that recognition forced a painful reckoning. James and I had developed a new relationship as well, one based on mutual respect, rather than the implicit competition that had defined our childhood. I always knew you were brilliant, he told me during his visit to Cambridge, but I let myself become part of the narrative that my kind of work was somehow more valuable than yours. I'm sorry for that. After my Nobel lecture, we stood together in the grand reception hall, champagne glasses in hand, as scientists and dignitaries approached to congratulate me. The same mother who once couldn't bother to attend my college graduation now proudly introduced herself to Nobel laureates in other fields, her voice carrying a new, genuine warmth when she said, "I'm Olivia Began's mother." My father, in his more reserved way, had made his own amends. He had taken it upon himself to read A Brief History of Time and similar books, determined to develop at least a layman's understanding of the field his daughter had helped revolutionize. During a quiet moment at the Nobel banquet, he leaned over and said simply, "I missed so much by not paying attention. I won't make that mistake again." The most profound change, however, wasn't in how my family saw me, but in how I saw myself. The constant, exhausting need for validation that had driven me for decades had finally dissipated. The Nobel Prize hadn't given me that freedom. It had merely served as the catalyst for a realization long overdue. My worth had never depended on their recognition of it. As Eliza and I concluded our acceptance speech to thunderous applause, I felt a sense of closure that transcended the professional achievement. The young girl who had hidden in libraries, teaching herself physics from borrowed textbooks while her family praised her brother's more conventional success, had finally come full circle. At the gala following the ceremony, a journalist approached me with a familiar question. "Dr. Began, what inspired you to pursue theoretical physics against such difficult odds?" I considered the question carefully, aware of my mother standing just a few feet away, listening intently. "Sometimes," I replied, "being told you can't do something, or being told you're not the type of person who does that thing, creates a determination that ultimately proves more powerful than encouragement. I pursued physics because it fascinated me, but I persisted despite obstacles because somewhere deep inside, I needed to prove something." "To the scientific community?" the journalist prompted. I smiled. "To myself, and that proof would have been valid even without this medal and ceremony. The work itself was always the real validation." Later that evening, as the formal events concluded, my family and I walked together through the snowy Stockholm streets, the December air crisp and clear. My mother linked her arm through mine, a casual gesture of affection that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. "I've been thinking about something," she said hesitantly. "All those science fairs and awards you won as a child, I still have them. Everything. The ribbons, the certificates, the newspaper clippings. I kept them all in a box in the attic." I looked at her, surprised. "I thought you'd thrown them away," she shook her head, regret evident in her expression. "I couldn't bring myself to celebrate them properly, but I couldn't discard them either. Some part of me must have known they mattered, even if I couldn't admit it. When we get home," she continued, "I'd like to frame some of them, if that's okay with you. It's long overdue." The gesture, though symbolic and belated, touched me deeply. "I'd like that," I said softly. 6 weeks later, I returned to my lab at Cambridge, where the real work continued. The Nobel Prize had brought attention and funding, opening doors to research possibilities we'd previously only dreamed of pursuing. Eliza and I expanded our team, pushing the boundaries of quantum teleportation further. The fundamental nature of my relationship with physics remained unchanged by the accolades. I was still driven by the same curiosity, the same obsessive attention to detail, the same thrill of discovery. What had changed was the weight I carried while doing it, the desperate need to prove my worth, to my family, to the world, to myself, had lightened considerably. On my office wall hung 2 framed items side by side, my Nobel Prize certificate, and, beside it, a faded blue ribbon from a middle school science fair. My mother had sent the latter after carefully removing it from her attic collection, along with a note that read simply, "Both of these matter. I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. Love, Mom." On my weekly video calls with my family, my mother now eagerly asked about my current research. She didn't pretend to understand the technical details, but she engaged with genuine interest in the process and implications. My father had joined a Science for Non-Scientists course at their local community college. Small steps, but meaningful ones. The last time we spoke, as our call was ending, my mother said something that would have once seemed impossible. "You know, I was wrong that day. You're not Einstein. You're Olivia Began, and that's something even more remarkable." As I look back on that Thanksgiving day when my mother's mockery collided with the Nobel announcement, I realized it was never really about proving her wrong. It was about claiming the right to define my own success, to pursue excellence on my own terms, to be fully and unapologetically myself, whether or not anyone else approved. The live stream that began during our Thanksgiving dinner didn't just announce a scientific achievement. It forced a confrontation with truth that had been avoided for decades. In quantum physics, we speak of observation changing the state of particles. That day, the observation of my success fundamentally changed the state of my family's perception, not just of me, but of themselves, and the stories they had constructed about who we all were. Sometimes the most profound discoveries happen not in laboratories, but in living rooms, where long-held beliefs collapse under the weight of undeniable evidence. My quantum breakthrough may have earned the Nobel Prize, but the breakthrough in my family's understanding of me, and my understanding of myself without their validation, was perhaps the greater achievement. Have you ever had your abilities systematically underestimated by those closest to you? How did you respond? With defiance, with despair, or with determination? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding validation in unexpected places. Sometimes the people who believe in you least become the witnesses to your greatest triumphs, whether they're ready for that revelation or not.